What sort of focus did you have?
Yeah, well, the focus there was more on guarding the so-called Dutch school of coaching. Basically, I was the first one in that position, because before that, and that was up and included 1998, when Guus left after the World Cup. Yeah. Always the national coach was responsible for all the underpinning teams. But there was a situation at that time in Holland that basically also every coach started to do their own thing, and my brief of the board of the Dutch FFA was to get that all back in line again. So that was more a focus of one line through all the teams.
And so that leads me to when Kelly Cross, who works with you and has been an old friend of mine, introduced me to you when you were looking for somebody who was a so-called skills specialist. And I know you have so many contacts. I was really honoured that you would even consider me. But when we first met, I had to say that you were a little suspicious of me regarding the fact that from Holland, Coerver, and I'll explain the difference between Coerver coaching and Will Coerver, but Coerver was had two camps, you know, some followers and some not so, and I had to work pretty hard for 2 days to try to convince you that in 30 years what people knew as Coerver had evolved.
Yeah. Well, there is a long history in Holland, and I must say that Will was and is a bit of a controversial coach, and his philosophy and approach also, because there were basically in Holland two camps, and I'm now talking the 1980s. Yeah. And one camp was the legendary Rinus Michels and his philosophy to football. And then you had Will's philosophy. And basically Will's philosophy was he analyzed all the top players in the world, and he then broke down their skills. He also gave them the names. So you had the Chico move, and you had the Rivellino and the Cruyff, and then he broke those moves down to the very component and started to teach the kids in isolation those moves. Well, and then there was a huge debate in Holland, because Rinus Michels, he had another philosophy, and he said, look, you can distinguish all those separate components, technical components. You can distinguish them, but you can't separate them from the whole football context. So you shouldn't do that. There should always be what he called game-specific resistances in anything you try to coach. And that debate basically caused two camps in Dutch football.
That was in the 80s, right?
Yeah, and I'm more of the Rinus Michels side of things. So therefore I was a bit suspicious, you know, and I wanted to find out where you came from, Alf.
Yeah, no, look, I appreciate your honesty on that, and I think you came to about 2 days of clinics, and one of the things, if we then backtrack, is that, let's go forward. When we finished, I think what you said to me when we were having coffee was that you'd seen the evolution of Coerver. In other words, what Coerver was in 1980s and what we were presenting today. And one of the points that probably Charlie Cook and myself differed from Will in the 80s was the full pressure, when you introduced full pressure. And I think in the sessions we did, that was one thing that you said, well, you were convinced.
But that's spot on. And that's why, you know, what we call the skill acquisition building block in the curriculum, well, that very clearly has your signature, Alf. And that's why we've also we're recognizing you and Coerver coaching in our curriculum.
No,
That was spot on. So you totally convinced me then and there.
And the other thing, Han, it's our 30th year. So what happened was in 1984, 85, Will decided to go to UAE and was working there, and Charlie and I wanted to actually run a business based on this inspirational idea, because he was a genius in this notion that you could really teach specialist player skills like 1v1 to normal players. The only thing is, Charlie and I couldn't see a curriculum. And I don't know if that was the case in Holland in the 80s too, where we were trying to think, we saw these wonderful movements, but we didn't know if we were coaching, what do you put in warm-up, what do you put in the middle, what do you put in the end? Was that also
that's true. You know, Will started in the 80s with, in the 70s even, I think, with first books. Then you got videos. I still see my son with the first Will Coerver book out in the garden, looking at the moves and then trying to do them. But it was always centered around the exercises, and there wasn't not actually a clear construction of a whole session. And I think that's what you guys took it to that level, and you guys developed the whole curriculum.